The massive human ship USS Heritage moved slowly through space toward the giant station called Harmony Point. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge looking out at the metal structure that would be home to the most important meeting in human history. The station was huge, bigger than any city on Earth, and it spun slowly in the darkness between the stars. "Sir, we're getting clearance to dock," said Lieutenant Katie Sullivan from her position at the communications console. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Katie had spent the last 3 years learning every alien language the humans had encountered, but the Zephyrians were different. Their language was like music mixed with the sound of breaking glass. Jake nodded and turned to Commander Alex Parker, who stood near the tactical station. Alex was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from too many fights. He had been Jake's security chief for 8 years, and Jake trusted him more than anyone else in the fleet. "Alex, are our people ready?" Jake asked. "Ready as they can be, Captain. The Marines are nervous, though. They've never seen aliens this big before." Alex pulled up a hologram showing the Zephyrian delegation. The aliens were tall, at least 7 feet, with skin that looked like blue crystal. Each one had 4 arms and eyes that glowed like stars. "The intelligence reports say they're warriors first, diplomats second." Jake studied the images. The leader was called Supreme Commander Vextal Corinth. He was bigger than the others, with more scars across his crystal skin. Next to him stood a smaller figure, still tall by human standards, identified as his daughter Zarlin. She was supposed to be their cultural expert and translator. "They've been fighting wars for 1,000 years, Katie said, reading from her tablet. "Their whole society is built around honor and strength. One wrong move from us, and they'll see it as weakness or an insult." The ship shuddered slightly as the docking clamps engaged. Through the windows, Jake could see the Zephyrian vessel on the other side of the station. It was black and covered in spikes, looking more like a weapon than a transport. Everything about these aliens screamed danger. "Captain, we have a problem," came a voice from behind them. Jake turned to see Private Danny Rodriguez walking onto the bridge. Danny was young, maybe 22, with dark hair and nervous energy that made him bounce on his feet when he talked. He was supposed to be with the other Marines, not on the bridge. "What are you doing here, Rodriguez?" Alex asked, his voice sharp. "Sorry, sir. Sergeant Williams sent me to tell you that the Zephyrian Honor Guard just arrived at the docking bay. They're armed with some kind of energy weapons we've never seen before." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The peace talks hadn't even started, and already there were problems. "How many?" 12, sir. They're standing in formation like they're ready for a fight." Katie looked up from her tablet. "Captain, I just got word from the station commander. The Zephyrians are demanding that we follow their greeting protocol exactly. Any mistake will be seen as a declaration of war." Jake had spent months preparing for this moment. Humanity had been in a cold war with the Zephyrian Empire for 10 years. No shots fired, but both sides building bigger fleets and stronger weapons. The politicians on Earth wanted peace, but they wanted it on human terms. The problem was that the Zephyrians didn't think like humans. "What's their greeting protocol?" Jake asked. Katie read from her tablet. "The senior officer approaches first. Alone. He stops exactly 10 feet away and waits for permission to speak. Then he presents his credentials and states his purpose. Any deviation from this pattern is considered an insult. And if they're insulted, they leave and never come back. Or they start shooting." Jake looked out at the Zephyrian ship again. 10 years of tension, hundreds of billions of dollars spent on weapons, and it all came down to walking the right number of steps and saying the right words. "Sir," Danny said, "some of the guys are asking if we're really going to trust these aliens. They look like they could tear a man apart with their bare hands." Alex put a hand on Danny's shoulder. "That's exactly why we need to get this right, son. We can't fight them. We have to talk to them. The communication system crackled to life. USS Heritage, this is Harmony Point Control. The Zephyrian delegation is requesting immediate meeting with your senior officer. They're waiting in conference. Room Alpha. Jake straightened his uniform and checked his appearance in the reflection on the window. Everything had to be perfect. One wrong word, one wrong gesture, and the war that everyone feared would become real. Katie, you're with me. Alex, bring a small security team, but keep them back. I don't want to look threatening. Captain, Danny said, what if something goes wrong? Jake looked at the young Marine. Danny had joined the fleet because he wanted to see the stars and maybe be part of something bigger than himself. Now he was about to witness the most dangerous diplomatic meeting in human history. Then we deal with it, Rodriguez. That's what we do. The three officers left the bridge and walked through the ship's corridors toward the docking bay. Other crew members stopped what they were doing to watch them pass. Everyone knew what was happening. Everyone knew that the next few hours would determine whether humanity would have peace or war. As they reached the airlock that connected to the station, Jake could hear his heartbeat in his ears. On the other side of that door were beings who could crush the human race if they wanted to. His job was to convince them that humans were worth keeping alive. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Captain Jake Morrison stepped into the unknown. The meeting room felt cold and strange. Captain Jake Morrison sat across from Supreme Commander Vextal Corinth, trying not to stare at the alien's 4 arms or the way his crystal skin caught the light. The Zephyrian commander was even bigger. In person, filling his chair like a mountain of blue stone. His daughter Zaralyn sat beside him, smaller but still taller than any human in the room. For 2 hours, they had been talking in circles. Every time Jake thought they were making progress, another cultural rule got in the way. The Zephyrians spoke in formal phrases that took forever to say simple things. When humans tried to be direct, the aliens saw it as rude. Your species lacks proper respect for authority, Commander Corinth said through the translator device. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. This makes meaningful discussion impossible. Katie Sullivan leaned forward. She had been taking notes and trying to find common ground, but the aliens seemed determined to find fault with everything humans did. Commander, we mean no disrespect. Our cultures express honor differently. Zaralyn spoke for the first time in an hour. Her voice was softer than her father's, but still strange to human ears. Humans make promises they cannot keep. Your military leaders speak of peace while building weapons of war. Jake felt his patience wearing thin. They had come here in good faith, but the Zephyrians acted like humans were children playing at being adults. We build weapons because your empire threatens our colonies. We want peace, but we won't be defenseless. Commander Corinth's eyes flared brighter. You dare question our motives? The Zephyrian Empire has conquered worlds before your species learned fire. Alex Parker, who had been standing quietly by the wall, stepped forward. Maybe we should take a break. Let everyone cool down. The Zephyrian commander stood up suddenly, his full height making everyone in the room feel small. We do not need cooling down. We need humans who understand their place in the galaxy. Jake stood up too, knowing he looked tiny next to the alien but refusing to be intimidated. Our place is as equals at this table. If you can't accept that, maybe there's no point to these talks. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the station's air systems. Then Commander Corinth spoke again, his voice even colder. Than before, we will consider your words. 1 hour break. Do not waste our time when we return. The Zephyrians left the room, their heavy footsteps echoing in the corridor. Jake sat back down and rubbed his face with his hands. This was going worse than he had feared. Captain, Katie said, I don't think they came here to make peace. I think they came here to show us how superior they think they are. Maybe, Jake said, but we have to keep trying. The alternative is war, and we can't win that. Meanwhile, Private Danny Rodriguez was walking through the station's observation deck. He had been told to patrol the area, but really there wasn't much to patrol. The station was neutral ground, and everyone here wanted the peace talks to succeed. Danny found himself looking out at the stars, thinking about home and wondering if he would ever see Earth again. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see one of the Zephyrians approaching. It was the female Zaralyn, walking alone without any guards. Up close, she was even more impressive than in the briefing photos. Her crystal skin seemed to glow with its own light, and her forearms moved with perfect coordination. "You are one of the human warriors," she said in English. Her accent was thick but understandable. "I'm a Marine, yes ma'am," Danny replied. Not sure if he should salute or bow or what. The briefings hadn't covered casual conversation with alien royalty. "I wanted to see your star charts," she said, pointing to a display panel on the wall. To understand how humans navigate space, Danny relaxed a little. She seemed curious rather than hostile. "Sure, I can show you the basics." He walked over to the panel and started explaining how human ships use the star patterns to find their way across the galaxy. Zaralyn listened carefully, asking questions that showed she was smart and genuinely interested. For a few minutes, Danny forgot she was an alien and just enjoyed talking to someone who wanted to learn. "Your species is interesting," she said after he finished explaining jump point calculations. "You explore without proper preparation. You take risks that would kill more sensible beings." Danny laughed. "Yeah, we get that a lot. Humans aren't exactly known for being careful." "It shows weakness," Zaralyn continued. "Proper planning prevents disaster. Rushing forward without understanding consequences is foolish." The criticism stung more than it should have. Danny had been listening to the Zephyrians talk down to humans all day, and he was getting tired of it. "We're not weak," he said, his voice harder now. "We might not plan every detail, but we get things done. By making mistakes that cost lives," she replied. "Your military records show this clearly. Humans die because they do not think before acting. At least we act," Danny shot back. "From what I've heard, your people spend so much time following rules and traditions that you never actually do anything new." Zaralyn's eyes flared the same way her father's had. "You know nothing about Zephyrian achievements. We have built an empire that spans 50 star systems while your species was still living in caves." "And you're still living in the past," Danny said, his temper getting the better of him. "All those rules and ceremonies and formal speeches. No wonder you can't get anything done." "How dare you speak to me this way," Zaralyn said, stepping closer. "I am daughter of the Supreme Commander. You are nothing but a low-ranking soldier." Something inside Danny snapped. The day of tension, the failed negotiations, the constant insults to his species all came together in a moment of pure anger. Without thinking, he put his hands on her shoulders and pushed her away from him. "Back off," he said. Zaralyn stumbled backward, more from surprise than force. For a moment, she just stared at him with wide eyes. Then her expression changed to something Danny had never seen before. Pure, cold rage mixed with what looked like fear. "You touched me," she whispered. "You put your hands on me without permission." Danny realized what he had done and felt his blood turn to ice. The briefings had mentioned something about physical contact being taboo in Zephyrian culture, but he had been too angry to remember. "I'm sorry," he started to say, but Zaralyn was already backing away from him. "You do not understand what you have done," she said, her voice shaking. "This cannot be undone. This cannot be forgiven." She turned and ran from the observation deck, leaving Danny alone with the terrible knowledge that he had just destroyed any chance for peace between their species. Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing his notes when the door to his quarters burst open. Alex Parker rushed in, his face pale and sweat dripping down his forehead. Behind him came Katie Sullivan, carrying her tablet and looking scared. "Captain, we have a serious problem," Alex said, breathing hard. "The Zephyrians are demanding Rodriguez be handed over immediately for execution." Jake dropped his notes and stood up. "What happened?" "He pushed the commander's daughter," Katie said, her voice shaking. "Physical contact without permission is considered a grave crime in their culture. The punishment is death." Before Jake could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Captain Morrison, report to Conference Room Alpha immediately. The Zephyrian delegation requires your presence." The voice belonged to the station commander, and he sounded nervous. Jake grabbed his uniform jacket and followed Alex and Katie through the corridors. Other crew members stopped and stared as they passed. Word was spreading fast that something had gone terribly wrong. When they reached the conference room, Jake saw the worst sight of his career. 12 Zephyrian warriors stood in formation around the room, their energy weapons drawn and glowing. Commander Corinth sat at the head of the table, his forearms crossed and his crystal skin darker than before. Zaralyn stood behind him, her eyes red like she had been crying. "Captain Morrison," Commander Corinth said, his voice like thunder, "your soldier has committed an unforgivable act. He has touched my daughter without permission. According to the sacred laws of our people, he must die." Jake felt the room spin around him. One stupid mistake by a young Marine, and the entire peace process was destroyed. Worse than that, they were probably all going to die right here on this station. "Commander, I understand your anger," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady, "but surely we can find another way to handle this." "There is no other way," Corinth replied. "The law is clear. The punishment is death. Bring us the one called Rodriguez, and we will carry out justice." Alex stepped forward. "We cannot hand over one of our people to be executed. That's not how humans do things." The Zephyrian warriors shifted slightly, their weapons now pointing directly at the human delegation. Jake could see their fingers on the triggers. One word from their commander, and the room would be filled with energy beams. "Then you choose war over justice," Corinth said. "So be it. We will return to our ship and inform the Empire that humans cannot be trusted. Within 1 standard year, our fleets will reduce your colonies to ash." Katie was frantically scrolling through her tablet, reading everything she could find about Zephyrian law. "Captain," she whispered, "there might be something here. An old legal provision called the Trial of Understanding. What is it?" Jake whispered back, "It's a form of ritual combat. The accused can choose a champion to fight for their honor. If the champion wins, the crime is forgiven." Jake looked at the Zephyrian warriors. Each one was 7 feet tall and looked like they could break a human in half. "What are the rules of this combat?" Katie kept reading. "Combat continues until one fighter surrenders or is unable to continue. The accused can serve as their own champion if they choose." Before Jake could say anything, the conference room door opened again. Danny Rodriguez walked in, flanked by 2 Marine guards. The young man looked smaller than usual, his face white, with fear but his back straight. He had heard what was happening and come to face the consequences. "Commander Corinth," Danny said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I understand what I did wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult your daughter or your culture." The Zephyrian commander stood up to his full height, towering over the young Marine. "Apologies are meaningless. You have violated our most sacred laws. Only death can restore honor." "Wait," Zaralyn said suddenly. She stepped forward, speaking quickly in the Zephyrian language. Her father responded angrily, waving his arms. They argued for several minutes while the humans watched in confusion. Finally, Zaralyn turned to face the room. "I invoke the trial of understanding," she said in English. The human may choose a champion to fight for his honor. If his champion prevails, the crime is forgiven, and peace talks may continue. Commander Corinth looked furious but nodded slowly. My daughter speaks. The old laws correctly. The trial of understanding is permitted, though it has not been used in 300 years. Jake stepped forward immediately. I volunteer to serve as Rodriguez's champion. No, sir, Danny said, his voice stronger now. This is my mistake. I should be the one to fix it. Rodriguez, you can't fight one of their warriors, Alex said. They're twice your size and trained from birth for combat. Danny looked around the room at the faces of his officers, at the Zephyrian warriors, at Zaralin, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. A man has to face the consequences of his own actions, he said. I won't hide behind someone else. Commander Corinth studied the young Marine with interest. You would fight our champion yourself, knowing you will likely die? Yes, sir, Danny replied. I made the mistake. I'll pay for it. For the first time since entering the room, Corinth looked something other than angry. There was a flicker of what might have been respect in his glowing eyes. Very well. The trial will take place in 1 hour in the station's arena. My champion will be Kethmer, captain of my honor guard. Jake looked at the Zephyrian warrior Corinth had indicated. Kethmer was even bigger than the others, covered in scars that told the story of countless battles. His forearms were thick with muscle, and his eyes burned like stars. The rules are simple, Corinth continued. Combat continues until one fighter surrenders or cannot continue. No weapons except what you carry in your body. No assistance from others. Victory brings honor to your cause. Defeat brings death. Danny nodded, his jaw set with determination. I understand. As the Zephyrians filed out of the room, Jake grabbed Danny by the shoulder. Son, you don't have to do this. Let me fight in your place. Captain, with respect, you trained me to take responsibility for my actions. That's what I'm doing. Katie looked up from her tablet. Danny, I've been reading about Zephyrian combat. They're warriors trained for centuries. They're faster and stronger than humans in every way. Then I guess I'll have to be smarter, Danny said with a weak smile. Or luckier. Alex shook his head. This is suicide, Rodriguez. That warrior will tear you apart. Danny looked out the conference room window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there was Earth, where his family lived and worked and hoped for peace. Somewhere out there were human colonies full of people who just wanted to live their lives without fear of alien invasion. Maybe, he said quietly. But if I don't try, we're all dead anyway. At least this way there's a chance. The hour passed. Too quickly. Soon it would be time for Danny Rodriguez to step into an arena and fight for the future of the human race. The arena was bigger than Danny Rodriguez had expected. It was a circular space with smooth metal walls and bright lights that made everything look harsh and cold. Hundreds of beings from different species filled the viewing seats, all wanting to see the fight between human and Zephyrian. Danny had never felt so alone. He stood in the center of the arena wearing simple combat clothes, trying to control his breathing. Across from him, Kethmer waited with the patience of a predator. The Zephyrian champion was massive, his forearms moving in slow patterns as he warmed up. Scars covered his crystal skin like a map of every battle he had ever fought. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the human section with Katie Sullivan and Alex Parker. Jake's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. This is wrong, he said quietly. I should be down there, not him. Danny made his choice, Katie replied, but her voice was shaking. We have to respect that. In the Zephyrian section, Commander Corinth sat like a statue, his glowing eyes fixed on the arena floor. Zaralin sat beside him, but she kept looking away from the fighting space. She had not spoken since the trial began. The station commander's voice echoed through the arena. The trial of understanding will now begin. Combat continues until one fighter surrenders or cannot continue. Begin. Kethmer moved first, crossing the arena in 3 quick steps. His first punch came faster than Danny could follow, catching him in the chest and sending him flying backward. Danny hit the wall hard and slid to the floor, already struggling to breathe. The Zephyrian crowd cheered. Their champion was doing exactly what they expected, showing the weakness of human warriors. Danny pushed himself up, tasting blood in his mouth. Kethmer waited in the center of the arena, not even breathing hard. Danny circled to the left, trying to find an opening. He had trained in hand-to-hand combat for years, but this was different. Kethmer had 4 arms, each one as strong as Danny's. Whole body. The alien's reach was longer, his reflexes faster, his experience measured in centuries. Danny feinted left and dove right, trying to get behind his opponent. Kethmer spun with impossible speed, catching Danny with a backhand that sent him rolling across the floor. More cheers from the Zephyrian section. "Get up, Rodriguez," Alex shouted from the stands. "Don't give up." Danny spat blood and got to coup. His feet again. Kethmer advanced slowly, confident in his superiority. He swung with his upper right arm, a blow that would have crushed Danny's skull. Danny ducked and rolled, barely avoiding the strike. For 10 minutes, the pattern continued. Kethmer would attack with overwhelming force, and Danny would dodge, or absorb the hit and keep fighting. The human was getting slower, his reflexes dulled by pain and exhaustion. Blood ran from cuts on his face and arms. Why does he not surrender? One of the Zephyrian observers asked. "He cannot win." "Commander." Corinth leaned forward in his seat. The human was clearly outmatched, but he kept getting up after every knockdown. There was something in the young warrior's eyes that Corinth had not expected to see. Determination that bordered on madness. Danny's ribs felt broken, and his left arm was not working right. But he stayed on his feet and kept looking for chances to attack. When Kethmer came forward again, Danny did something unexpected. Instead of dodging away, he stepped into the attack. Kethmer's punch caught Danny in the shoulder, but Danny was already moving. He grabbed the Zephyrian's arm and used his momentum to throw himself up and over, landing behind his opponent. For a moment, he had a clear shot at Kethmer's back. Danny drove his knee into the alien's spine with all his remaining strength. Kethmer grunted and stumbled forward, the first sign of damage he had shown. The human crowd erupted in cheers. But the advantage lasted only seconds. Kethmer spun around, all 4 arms moving at once. Danny tried to block, but there were too many strikes coming from too many directions. He went down hard, his vision blurring. This time, getting up was harder. Danny's legs felt like water, and his head was spinning. He could hear Captain Morrison shouting his name, but the words seemed to come from very far away. Kethmer stood over him, waiting for the surrender that had to come. "Yield," the Zephyrian champion said in English. "You have fought with honor. There is no shame in admitting defeat." Danny looked up at his opponent through eyes that were swelling shut. Around the arena, hundreds of beings watched him, waiting to see if the human would finally give up. In the stands, he could see his captain and his friends, their faces full of worry and pride. "No," Danny said, pushing himself up to his knees. "Not yet." Something changed in the arena. The Zephyrian crowd, which had been cheering for their champion, grew quiet. Even some of the other alien species stopped their conversations to watch. The human who should have been unconscious was trying to stand up again. Danny made it to his feet, swaying like a tree in the wind. His face was bloody and bruised, his uniform torn, but his eyes were still clear. "Come on," he said to Kethmer. "I'm not done yet." Kethmer studied his opponent with new interest. In 300 years of fighting, he had never seen anyone take this much punishment and keep standing. The human was clearly finished, but he would not admit it. "You cannot win," Kethmer said. "Your body is broken. Your strength is gone." Why do you continue? Danny wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. Because if I quit, people die. My people, your people, everyone who wants peace instead of war. I won't let that happen because I made a stupid mistake. For the first time in the fight, Kethmer hesitated. He had expected to face a human warrior who would fight until he could not continue. But this was something else. This was a human who would fight until he was dead, not because he was brave, but because he felt responsible for the consequences. In the stands, Zaralyn was watching Danny with wide eyes. "Father," she whispered to Commander Corinth, "he fights. Not for glory or honor. He fights because he believes he must." Corinth nodded slowly. "I see it, daughter. This human understands duty in a way I did not expect." Danny charged forward one more time, knowing it would probably be his last chance. Kethmer met him in the center of the arena, and for a moment they were locked together. 4 arms against 2, alien strength against human determination. Then Danny's legs gave out completely. He collapsed to the floor and could not get up. Again, his body had finally reached its limit. Kethmer stood over him, ready to deliver the finishing blow. But instead of striking, the Zephyrian champion did something that shocked everyone in the arena. He reached down with one of his hands and helped Danny sit up. "You have fought well, human," Kethmer said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You have shown courage that honors your species." Danny looked up at him, confused. "Does that mean I win?" "No," Kethmer said with what might have been a smile. "But it means you have earned something more valuable than victory. You have earned respect." The arena fell silent as Kethmer helped Danny Rodriguez to his feet. Blood dripped from the young Marine's face onto the metal floor, but he was still conscious and still trying to stand straight. Around them, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy watched in amazement. Commander Corinth rose from his seat and walked down to the arena floor. His heavy footsteps echoed in the silence. When he reached the center, he looked down at Danny for a long moment, studying the human who had refused to surrender. "In 300 years of trials, no fighter has ever impressed my champion enough to earn his assistance," Corinth said, his voice carrying across the arena. "You lost the combat, human, but you have won something far more valuable." Danny swayed. On his feet, held up partly by Kethmer's steady hand. "What's that, sir?" "Understanding," Corinth replied. "I see now that humans do not fight the same way we do. You do not fight for glory or to prove strength. You fight because you believe it is right, even when you know you cannot win." Captain Jake Morrison jumped down from the stands and ran to Danny's side. "Rodriguez, you crazy kid, are you all right?" "I think so, Captain," Danny said, though his voice was weak. "Did we win?" Corinth looked at his daughter, who had also come down to the arena floor. Zaralyn approached Danny slowly, her 4 arms held in a gesture of respect that humans had never seen before. "Human warrior," she said, "I owe you an apology. When you pushed me, I was angry and insulted. But I see now that you acted from emotion, not malice. Your species feels deeply and acts quickly. This is not weakness as I believed." Danny tried to focus on her face, but his vision was still blurry from the fight. "I'm sorry I pushed you. Ma'am, I was wrong to lose my temper like that. And I was wrong to judge all humans by one moment of anger," Zaralyn replied. "You have shown me that humans will sacrifice themselves for others, even for those they barely know. This is a form of honor we did not recognize." Kethmer helped Danny sit down on a bench that someone had brought into the arena. The Zephyrian champion looked at the human medical team that was rushing toward them. "Your warrior needs healing. But he will recover. He has the heart of a true fighter." Katie Sullivan arrived with the medical kit and began checking Danny's injuries. "You have a concussion, probably some broken ribs, and more cuts than I can count," she said while cleaning the blood from his face. "But you're going to be fine." "More importantly," Alex Parker said, kneeling beside Danny, I think you just save the peace talks. Commander Corinth stood before the mixed crowd in the arena and spoke in a voice that reached every corner. Let all beings here witness what has happened today. The human called Danny Rodriguez committed an offense against our laws, but he faced the consequences with courage. He fought knowing he would lose, not for personal glory, but because he felt responsible for the peace between our peoples. The commander paused and looked directly at Danny. This shows a form of honor that the Zephyrian Empire can respect. Therefore, I formally pardon his offense and declare that the peace talks will continue. Cheers erupted from the human section of the arena. Other species began applauding as well, caught up in the moment of reconciliation between two proud civilizations. Only Danny seemed unaware of the celebration around him as the medical team worked on his injuries. 3 hours later, Danny was lying in the station's medical bay with his ribs wrapped and his cuts bandaged. Captain Morrison sat beside his bed, holding a cup of coffee and looking exhausted. The doctors say you'll be back on duty in a week, Jake said. Though I'm thinking of recommending you for a transfer to diplomatic security. Turns out you're good at making peace. Danny tried to sit up but winced at the pain in his ribs. Captain, I almost started a war. How is that good at making peace? Because you showed them something they needed to see, Jake replied. The Zephyrians thought humans were weak and undisciplined. You proved that we're willing to sacrifice everything for what we believe is right. The door to the medical bay opened and Zaralyn entered, followed by 2 of her guards. She had changed from her formal diplomatic robes into simpler clothes, and she carried a small object in her hands. I hope I am not disturbing your recovery, she said to Danny. No, ma'am, please come in, Danny replied, trying to sit up straighter. Zaralyn approached the bed and held out the object she was carrying. It was a crystal pendant that glowed with soft blue light. This is a Zephyrian honor token. It is given to warriors who show exceptional courage in battle. I want you to have it. Danny looked at the beautiful crystal, then back at Zaralyn. I don't understand. I lost the fight. You lost the combat, but won the respect of my people, she explained. More importantly, you helped me understand that honor takes many forms. Humans show honor through personal responsibility and willingness to sacrifice for others. This is different from our traditions, but it is equally valid. Over the following days, the peace talks resumed with a completely different atmosphere. The Zephyrians no longer treated humans as inferior beings who needed to be taught proper behavior. Instead, they worked as equals to find solutions that both species could accept. Danny recovered from his injuries and returned to duty, but he found that everything had changed. Zephyrian warriors would nod respectfully when they saw him, and even Commander Corinth would stop to ask about his health. More importantly, the two species began to learn from each other. Humans started studying Zephyrian military tactics and cultural traditions. Zephyrians became interested in human adaptability and emotional depth. Young beings from both civilizations volunteered for exchange programs. 6 months later, Danny stood in the same observation deck where his troubles had begun, but now he was not alone. Zaralyn was with him, pointing out constellations visible from Zephyrian space and asking about human navigation techniques. I still cannot believe you. We're willing to fight Kethmer knowing you would lose, she said. Danny shrugged, a gesture he had taught her the meaning of. Sometimes doing the right thing means accepting the consequences, even when they're bad. That's what my parents taught me. Your parents must be very wise, Zaralyn said. They're just regular people who wanted their kids to understand responsibility. Danny replied, nothing special about them. Zaralyn looked at him with the expression humans had learned meant affection among her people. I think being regular people who raise children with such strong values is very special indeed. Through the observation deck windows, they could see ships from both civilizations docking at the station. Humans and Zephyrians worked together, now building something that neither species could have achieved alone. The Cold War that had threatened to become a hot one was over, replaced by an alliance based on mutual respect and understanding. Danny touched the crystal pendant he wore around his neck, a reminder that sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest actions. He had pushed an alien princess in a moment of anger, and somehow that mistake had led to peace between worlds. It was, he thought, a very human way for things to work out.